Livia was always the kind of person who would say everything's fine, even when it wasn't. From a young age, she learned that being strong meant enduring everything in silence. He never complained, he never asked for help. He helped others, but forgot about himself. At work, she was the one who solved everything. At home, she was the one who always gave in to avoid a fight. In relationships, she was the one who loved more than she was loved. And, little by little, it was lost not because someone took it away, but because she herself neglected it. On that gray Monday, the mirror was cruel. Deep dark circles under her eyes, a tired expression, and a look that seemed to plead for help. She mechanically got ready, tied her hair back, put on her usual lipstick, and left without looking at herself again. The body continued on, but the soul, no longer came along. On the bus, the city noise mingled with the muffled sound of her mind. Repetitive heavy thoughts. Am I really good at what I do? Does he still love me? Would anyone miss me if I disappeared for a few days? Those questions remained unanswered, echoing in the inner silence she herself didn't want to hear. At work, her boss called her aside. Livia, we need to talk. The company is going through some adjustments, and unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. She stood still. She neither cried nor questioned anything. She simply nodded, grabbed her bag, and left. Outside, the wind felt colder than ever. It was as if the universe had decided to push her into an abyss. This time, she didn't even know if she wanted to try to climb out. He wandered aimlessly. He walked through streets he didn't know, until he stopped in front of a small coffee shop with a sign that read, "Open, sometimes, new beginnings start with coffee." She went inside. The smell of fresh coffee and the soft sound of old music brought a strange feeling of comfort. He sat by the window, ordered an espresso, and watched the rain fall. On the other side of the counter, a gray-haired lady watched. She had that look of someone who sees beyond the obvious. He approached and asked gently, "A tough day?" Livia gave an awkward smile. "A little." The woman nodded and said, "You know, sometimes life takes everything away from us just so we remember to choose ourselves again." Livia looked up. That sentence struck a chord within her. It was as if someone had verbalized exactly what their heart had been trying to say for months. They talked for a few minutes. Nothing too profound, but enough to ignite a spark of humanity on that cold day. Before leaving, the woman wrote something on a napkin and handed it over. "For when you forget who you are." Livia put it away without reading it. She arrived home, dropped her bag, and collapsed onto the sofa. Only then did he remember the napkin. He opened it, and there it was written, "Self-love is not a luxury. It's survival disguised as courage." She cried. But for the first time in a long time, the tears were not of despair, they were of recognition. As if the body were saying, "Finally, you listened to me." That night, Livia slept hugging herself. And, without realizing it, she took the first step back into her own life. The next morning, when the sun grazed the curtain, Livia decided to get up without bargaining with her pillow. She had no job, no answers, but she had one thing she hadn't remembered in a long time: the will to try. She went to the kitchen, boiled water, slowly brewed the coffee, and breathed in the aroma as if holding on to an invisible handrail to avoid falling back into the hole. She opened the window. The street was still damp from the previous night's rain. A boy rode by on his bicycle. The neighbor watered the plants. The newsagent arranged the bundles of paper in the display case. Life, indifferent to personal tragedies, went on. And that, somehow, gave her a kind of quiet courage. In the notebook he found at the bottom of the drawer, he wrote at the top of the page, "The Yes and No Notebook." Below, he drew 2 columns. On the left, what you would continue to say yes to. On the right, everything you would learn to say no to. Try. Eat without guilt when you're truly hungry. Walking around the neighborhood every morning. Ask for help when the weight is greater than your arms can handle. To study something that sparks interest. Go to bed early, even if your cell phone begs for company. No, working for free in the name of partnership. Accepting crumbs of affection for fear of being alone. Pretending that everything is fine in order to be easy to live with. Confusing silence with peace. Returning to places where one has already gotten lost. The list made no sound, but it changed the contours of his soul. He closed the notebook carefully, as if sealing a pact. It started small. He traded haste for steps. He went for a walk. On the way, he noticed a picture frame shop he'd never seen before. A puppy sleeping on its back. The smell of bread wafting from the corner bakery. He returned with a bag of warm bread, smiled at the baker, and felt his face remember the movement. In the afternoon, she tidied the house, opened the windows, washed the blanket that stubbornly clung to the smell of the bad week. She put on an old song, one of those her mother used to sing while washing dishes, and suddenly felt like dancing alone in the living room. She did. She laughed at her own awkwardness. For a few minutes, she believed that life could, indeed, be simple. When her cell phone vibrated, the world tested her newfound courage. It was a message from her ex. "Can we talk? I miss you." The old Livia would have run. The new one breathed. Her hand trembled, but she put the phone down on the table and returned to her notebook. "No, accepting crumbs. Yes, honoring what hurts and what heals," she replied kindly, without making promises to the past. "I wish you well. I'm starting over. It's not the time for us to talk." She sent it. Her heart raced. Then it slowed down. Her body understood. Saying no is also embracing oneself. At the end of the day, she returned to the Napkin Cafe. As soon as she entered, the gray-haired lady whom she now knew was called Donna Celeste raised her eyes and smiled with that welcoming, non-intrusive way of hers. "How's your heart today?" he asked. "Less noisy," Livia replied. "I think he's trying to learn a new song." Donna Celeste inclined her head, satisfied. "New music requires practice. And silence between the notes," she said, handing over a small teapot. "Chamomile tea with honey. It helps the soul not to run faster than the legs." They spoke little, like someone sewing large stitches on a garment that will one day be altered. Before leaving, Celeste pointed to a discreet poster on the wall. "Portfolio and Job Placement Workshop Saturdays, 9 a.m. I host this event every month," he explained. "Good people who have forgotten how to talk about themselves. People who need to relearn how to see themselves." Livia wrote down the address. She didn't promise to go, but inside, she already had. On her way home, she opened her laptop. The reflection on the screen showed a woman with her hair haphazardly tied up and less tired eyes. She spent hours organizing folders, sorting through old work, retrieving forgotten compliments from lost emails. She found a "congratulations on your attention to detail" from a client. Your organization saved the project from a colleague, and the voice of who she once was began to return. She saved everything in a folder called "I'm good at this." It sounds silly, but it hurt deeply. On Saturday, she went to the workshop. 3 tables, 8 people, freshly brewed coffee. Donna Celeste began by asking each person to say their name and something they knew how to do well, but it only counted if their eyes sparkled while speaking. It was Livia's turn. Her voice failed her. She took a breath. "I organize chaos," he finally said. "In teams, in projects, in lost ideas. I like to take a tangled mess and turn it into a path." People smiled, those silent, warming expressions of agreement. Celeste clapped softly. "We need people who can organize chaos," he said. "The world is full of them." In the second half of the meeting, the task was to assemble a concise portfolio and write a short presentation, without empty words. Livia stared at the blank screen as one faces a long road. She wrote, erased, rewrote, until, suddenly, it no longer sounded like a resume, but like the truth. "I create roots where there was previously only noise. I believe that clear processes unleash talent. My job is to get people to do theirs with less friction and more meaning." When she read aloud, she felt something align inside, like a vertebra returning to its place. Some participants wrote down phrases. A young man in a striped shirt asked if she offered project-based consulting. She didn't know. Or rather, she had never allowed herself to know. She said yes. In a whisper, they noted down contact information. In the following days, trials came. A former colleague asked for just a quick favor, which, in practice, was an entire job without pay. "Because it will give you visibility," Livia read it twice, to be sure of the trick of the compliment that comes with a hidden cost. She replied with gentle firmness, "I can help as a consultant. Here's my proposal and scope." The silence on the other end confirmed that, without the old availability, some doors close. She let them close. She learned that the echo of no is less painful than the hangover of betraying oneself. On the third day, a small healthy food company recommended by the young man from the workshop called. They wanted to organize processes, deadlines, menus, deliveries. Little money, but respect. 3 meetings, 2 flowcharts, a living spreadsheet that seemed like breathing. At the end, the owner, with tears in her eyes, said, "You didn't just fix the kitchen. You gave me back my breath." Livia almost cried. She received the payment, sent the invoice, and wrote in her notebook, "To be paid fairly for what I do well." That night, she stumbled upon an old urge to explain herself to the world. She wrote a long message to her ex, recounting her achievements of the week. She read it, reread it, and deleted it. She didn't need to. Instead, she wrote to herself, "I saw myself today," and she slept with that phrase as her pillow. On Sunday, she returned to the cafeteria with a cornbread recipe she'd learned from her mother. She left it on the counter with a note, "Thank you for reminding me of the obvious things that save lives." Celeste tasted it and closed her eyes. "You cook like you write. With intention," she said. "Have you ever thought about turning that into content? Good organizational practices, routine recipes, life maps." Life maps. Livia laughed. "Yes, people like you don't sell services. You deliver direction." Livia took the phrase home like a talisman. She opened a new document, life maps, drafts. She listed topics. How to say no without guilt. Yes, no notebook. Organizing the chaos of daily life, a routine that respects body and work. It seemed too grand. It seemed like a dream. And because it seemed like a dream, it deserved a try. Midweek, the past tried to call again, in the form of a former boss. He offered a temporary project, good pay, absurd deadlines, zero respect. She listened, thanked him, and asked, "Is there autonomy, a clear scope, and credit for the work?" On the other end, hesitation. The veneer fell away. The proposal, without the embellishments, was the same old windowless hallway. No. She hung up with cold hands and a straight spine. That night, fear came disguised as practicality. What if the money runs out? What if no one else hires you? What if saying no closes off the future? She went to the window, looked at the lights in the neighboring apartments, and remembered the first napkin. Self-love is not a luxury. It's survival disguised as courage. She whispered the phrase as if praying. Her heart slowed. Before going to sleep, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Today I understood that valuing myself isn't about shouting that I'm amazing. It's about keeping the deeper agreements I made with you. Don't sell yourself cheap. It's about choosing the table where I sit and the conversations I accept." She closed her eyes with the feeling that life, at last, was beginning to learn her name again. Courage, she discovered, doesn't arrive like fireworks. It arrives like a light bulb lit in a dark room. Silent, sufficient, stubborn. And, once lit, it's difficult to convince the heart to live in the dark again. The days began to change. There was still fear. Of course, fear never completely disappears. But now, fear no longer ruled. It was just a visitor knocking at the door, and Livia was learning not to serve him coffee. The project with the healthy food company opened other doors. A nutritionist recommended the work to a clinic. The clinic referred them to a small startup. And so, almost without realizing it, she had a full schedule again, only this time, full of things that made sense. For the first time, I was working without fading away. She didn't say yes to everything. She charged a fair price, presented herself with confidence, and when someone tried to negotiate the price by saying it's just a favor, she calmly replied, "My work is not a favor. It's dedication, it's time, it's life, and that has value." At first, saying that gave me a lump in my throat, but each time he repeated it, the knot became firmer. And firmness, with time, turned into peace. One day, while organizing spreadsheets on the computer, he received an unexpected message from Donna Celeste. "I have a different proposal for you. Come by tomorrow. Tea included." Curious, she went to the coffee shop late the following afternoon. The familiar smell of cornbread and brewed coffee made her smile. Celeste was at the counter, rummaging through a box full of papers and cards. "Ah, it's here," she said, with that air of someone who already knows what's coming before the question. "I need help getting things in order here." Livia laughed. "You want me to organize your chaos? Is that it?" "Exactly. And, who knows, maybe I'll introduce you to a new one." While they were organizing the stacks of cards and papers, Celeste explained that she wanted to open a small space next to the cafeterian environment for life workshops, writing, self-discovery, job placement, even emotional cooking. "I want you to coordinate this with me. You have method and heart. It's a rare combination." Livia remained silent. Part of her wanted to say, no, afraid of not being ready, of failing, of stepping outside the predictable. But Celeste's gaze was calm, confident, almost maternal. "Me, coordinate?" he asked. "You," Celeste replied without hesitation. "Because the world needs to hear those who have learned to listen to themselves." The next day, they began. The new space was named the Room of Courage. The main wall had a phrase painted by Celeste in gold paint. "Here, no one needs to shrink themselves to fit in." The first workshops were small 3 people, then 5, then 10. But something magical was happening there. The stories intertwined, and each one helped the other to remember who it was. Livia created activities using the yes-no notebook, and people cried, laughed, wrote, and looked at each other in a new way. One day, a woman arrived late, her eyes swollen. She said she had been fired the previous week. During the exercise, he wrote, "I've forgotten what I know how to do." Livia approached and replied softly, "You haven't forgotten. You just kept it to protect yourself. Let's open it together." At that moment, she realized that she was doing to others what Celeste had done for her. And she understood. Healing others was a beautiful way to continue healing herself. The Room of Courage began to spread through the city like a good whisper. Local magazines published articles about it, and the Instagram profile gained followers. One day, a follower wrote, "Your words saved me on a day when I almost gave up." Livia read the message and cried, but this time, tears of gratitude. The girl who was once lost was now a beacon for others who were still groping in the dark. A month later, she received an invitation to give a talk at a women's entrepreneurship event. Theme: How to value yourself in a world that insists on diminishing you. She almost refused. Fear tried to return with the old speech, "You're nobody. Nobody wants to listen to you." But Celeste said, "Do you know the difference between someone who is afraid and someone who is courageous? There is none. The difference is what they do even when they are afraid." On the day of the lecture, my hands were trembling. She began by saying, "For a long time, I thought that valuing myself meant convincing others of my worth. Today I know that it's about not letting anyone convince me otherwise." The audience fell silent. And as she spoke, she felt her own voice becoming more stable, not like that of a speaker, but like someone speaking from a real place. Finally, a woman from the audience stood up and said, in tears, "Thank you. I needed to hear that today." Livia stepped off the stage with her heart pounding. Celeste was in the front row, smiling, with a folded napkin in her hand. On the back, a new sentence: "Now that you've chosen yourself, the world will also choose to listen to you." Livia kept that napkin as a silent trophy. And, deep down, she understood that the recognition she had sought for years was not in others, it was in her own courage to have stayed. That night, he sat on the sofa with a cup of tea. She looked around the tidy room, the live plants, the computer open with new projects. Everything seemed the same, and, at the same time, completely different. She didn't become a different person. She simply returned to being who she always was, before believing she needed to diminish herself to be loved. She picked up the yes-no notebook and wrote a new line: "Yes, to continue growing without losing myself." And below, in firm letters, he wrote, "No, I won't let fear convince me again." He smiled. And for the first time, he felt proud of his own name. The success of the Room of Courage began to attract attention. A large consulting firm, known for its women's leadership events and programs, contacted Livia. The invitation seemed irresistible. A national partnership, speaking engagements in various cities, interviews, visibility. But there was a catch. They wanted her to adjust the tone of her content. "We need something lighter, more motivational, less emotional. Avoid talking about pain, trauma, and vulnerability. That weighs too heavily on the corporate audience." Livia read the email 3 times. It was the kind of offer she would have accepted without hesitation before. But now, that demand sounded like the old disguise of domestication. Be inspiring, but not too truthful. He spent the afternoon thinking. He opened the yes-no notebook. In his column, Sim wrote, "Reaching more people." In the no section, she wrote, "Erase what made me who I am." My heart was heavy. It was the kind of dilemma that separates what is glitter from what is just show. The next morning, he went to the coffee shop, his sort of temple. Celeste was waiting for her, as if she knew. "It seems the world has come to test your courage," he said, without Livia uttering a single word. Livia nodded. "They want me to talk about strength, but without showing where it comes from." "Ah," Celeste smiled. "They want the perfume without the garden." The silence between the two was so eloquent that it made advice unnecessary. After a while, Celeste added, "Livia, if what you say needs to change to fit somewhere, maybe that place isn't right for you." On the way back, her head was a whirlwind. It was difficult to say no to something so big, not out of vanity, but out of fear of missing the opportunity. But a certainty was emerging alongside the fear. She didn't want success that would cost her her essence. He opened the email and replied calmly and confidently, "I am deeply grateful for the invitation, but my message cannot exist without vulnerability. If I am going to talk about strength, I need to show what builds it." It sent. And for the first time, she didn't feel the fear of what if. He felt peace. Days later, the phone rang. It was the same company director. This time, the tone was different. I read your response. I confess I was moved. You know what? I think we need to hear more from people like you. Would you be willing to participate, but in your own way? Livia smiled. In my own way, yes. The event took place in São Paulo. The hall was full. Cameras, flashes, people in suits and heels. She took a deep breath before going on stage. This time, he wasn't trembling. It started with a simple sentence. There is no empowerment without truth. Because courage is not the opposite of fight, the act of continuing even while trembling. People fell silent, and gradually they began to get emotional. In the end, she received a standing ovation. Some cried, others took photos. But the most beautiful thing was the look in their eyes, that silent look of someone who understood. After the event, several women approached. One of them, a middle-aged executive, held Livia's hands and said, "You reminded me of the woman I was before I tried to be what others expected of me." That phrase kept echoing in Livia's mind the entire way back home. She thought about all the times she had silenced her own voice to please others, about how many versions of herself she had killed to fit in. Now she understood. Her worth was never invisible. It was just locked away in a corner where fear had placed a padlock. The following week, the lecture went viral. Excerpts from the speech circulated on social media. Within a few days, the Room of Courage received registrations from several cities. Emails arrived from distant places, with similar stories, women, men, young, old, all seeking the same thing, to remember their own worth. Livia realized something that hurt and healed at the same time. People are truly hungry. They live surrounded by prepared speeches, but what really matters is authenticity. She started giving interviews, but maintained a firm tone. He didn't romanticize starting over. He would say bluntly, starting over hurts. Loving yourself is a skill that requires practice, and the value you seek in others is the same value that awaits you within yourself. The audience identified with her because she wasn't talking about some unreachable place. She was talking about real life, about the mess and the rebuilding process. And so, the woman who once doubted herself became a voice of courage for thousands. One night, Celeste invited her to dinner. Simple table, homemade food, lemongrass tea. After a while, Celeste looked at her and said, "You noticed, right? The courage to value yourself isn't about shouting that you love yourself. It's about living in a way that shows it." Livia nodded, visibly moved. "I think that's what I've been searching for my whole life. And now you found it," Celeste replied. But not to keep to teach. That night, as they said goodbye, Celeste handed him an envelope. Inside, a piece of paper with firm handwriting. "When you know your own worth, no one will be able to replace you." Livia cried. It was the same essence as the first lesson, only now she truly understood. In the following days, he began writing a book. Title: The Room of Courage, Lessons I Learned from Choosing Myself. I didn't want to talk about success, but about truth. Each chapter was a memory transformed into a lesson. And at the end of the preface, he wrote, "I write not as someone who has arrived, but as someone who continues to learn how to stay." When she finished the last page, she looked at the document open on the screen and smiled. Everything was there: the pain, the fear, the courage, and, above all, self-respect. The sound of the notification on the cell phone interrupted the moment. It was a new message from a small publisher interested in publishing the book. The cycle closed with the same delicacy with which it began. And for the first time in a long time, Livia felt her heart lighten. Because now, everything she did stemmed from a single place: the love for who she had become. Months passed, and Livia's book began to take on a life of its own. The publisher believed in the project and released a small initial print run, modest, but full of truth. Word of mouth did the rest. Within a few months, social media was flooded with people sharing excerpts, photos of the book on coffee tables, and dedications scribbled on the first pages. But what really affected Livia were the messages. "I read your book on a bad day and it reminded me of who I was. The courage you expressed in your writing helped me leave an abusive relationship. Thank you for teaching me to say no without guilt." Each sentence was a silent confirmation that her value was no longer just hers now. It was a seed. One afternoon, Celeste called her over to talk. She was more tired than usual, her eyes a little deeper, but the same sparkle in her gaze. "I sat down to take stock of my life," he said, smiling. "And I realized I've already taught everything I needed to teach." Livia laughed. "I doubt. Seriously, girl, it's time for someone to take over this place. And I know who it is." Livia remained silent. My heart raced. Celeste picked up the teacup, blew on it, and added, "The room of courage is yours now." Livia almost protested, but Celeste raised her hand, asking for silence. "I was just the bridge. You are the path." Livia's eyes welled up with tears. He embraced that woman as if he were embracing destiny. They said nothing more, the kind of silence that says it all. In the following weeks, Celeste traveled to the countryside to rest her body and let her soul wander a little. He would send letters, always with a new sentence. Courage also rests. Don't blame yourself for the days when simply existing is enough. Those who stop comparing themselves to other people's gardens flourish. And so, with words that sounded like blessings, she bid farewell to the daily routine of the coffee shop. Livia took over the management of the space. He renovated the room, but kept the golden phrase on the wall. "Here, no one needs to shrink themselves to fit in." Every time I looked at her, I felt that Celeste was still there, in every detail, in every cup of tea served, in every person who arrived without hope and left believing a little more. One day, while tidying one of the drawers in the counter, she found a small box with a handwritten note, for when fear tries to convince you again. Inside, there was a mirror with a simple frame, and at the bottom of the frame, engraved in small letters, the words, "You are the reason I keep going." Livia smiled with tears in her eyes. It was as if the universe had decided to close the cycle with poetry. In the following months, the Room of Courage grew. It began offering online meetings, writing groups, and purpose-driven workshops. The physical space became too small, but the impact multiplied. The message was simple, yet powerful. Those who learn to value themselves free the world from the obligation to validate their existence. Livia started being invited to radio programs, podcasts, schools, and companies. But he always began his sentences the same way, before becoming a speaker. "I was someone who forgot about myself. And before being an example, I was the mistake itself, learning how to get back up." People listened to her in silence and left changed. Because no one came away the same after seeing themselves reflected in the vulnerability of someone who had the courage to exist fully. A year later, on the anniversary of the Room of Courage, the space was packed. Livia prepared a tribute to Celeste. On the wall, he projected a photo of the two of them together, laughing with cups of coffee in their hands. Below, he wrote, "For the person who taught me that courage is choosing yourself out loud." During the event, a young woman raised her hand and asked, "Livia, what is true value to you?" She remained silent for a few seconds. He looked at the audience, took a deep breath, and replied, "Value is what remains when you are stripped of everything that is superficial. It's what remains when love, status, jobs, and certainties are gone. It's something no one can give you and, therefore, no one can take away from you." Applause. But this time, Livia didn't cry. She simply smiled serenely, because he knew that answer didn't come from his mind, it came from his soul. At the end of the event, he sat by the window of the cafeteria, which was now closed to the public. The same place where she once arrived lost, searching for coffee, and found a new beginning. The night wind came in through the window, ruffled her hair, and she thought about everything she had lived through. The losses, the no's, the silences, the falls, the outstretched hands. He closed his eyes and murmured, "Thank you, life, for breaking me so that I could see myself whole." She smiled, unfolded the yellowed napkin from her first meeting with Celeste, and placed it beside the mirror. It was written there, "Self-love is not a luxury. It's survival disguised as courage." This time, she didn't cry. He simply raised his cup, toasted the sky, and whispered, "I understood." And the sound of the wind seemed to answer with a soft whisper, "I know. Value is not what is given to you, it's what you allow yourself to recognize." If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share it. Sometimes, the first step to changing your life is choosing yourself. Sometimes life will test you just to see if you've learned to choose yourself. And when everything seems to fall apart, remember this: your worth never depended on anyone else's opinion. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe to the channel. Here, each story is a reminder that self-love is not vanity, it's courage. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that there's still time to choose themselves again.